There we have Bhagwan Pamodi, Chief Information Officer, Capri Global Capital Limited. Let's give it up for Mr. Bhagwan, guys. Then we have Monish V. Vora, EVP and Head Operations, SBI Card. Let's give it up for Mr. Monish. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Yes. Then we have Priya Chaudhary, Head Brand and Media, Corporate HIL Limited. Let's call upon Mr. Priya, guys. Welcome, welcome. Last but not the least, we have Shivam Ahuja, Founder and CEO, Skill Circle. Let's give it up for Mr. Shivam.
Priya, my first question would be, what sustainability initiatives does your organization currently integrate into its customer experience strategy?
Cool, I think this is one of the brilliant questions, guys. You know, why? Because sustainability is no more buzzword, right? Irrespective of the organization size where they're operating, whether in Kuala Alto or maybe in some part of Western Asia or Southern Asia, right? Any country we think about, right? So sustainability is something which is actually prompting consumers to think about that what kind of a brand you need to choose. And while I've been leading brands in different consumer durable industries, right? From Samsung to Panasonic to Sony, Hewlett Packard, right? And now with Desha and CK Birla. So this is core of it. And before I answer you straight, right, I'd like to mention that when we look at brand growth, right, so the first point which comes in that a company or a brand definitely needs to be innovative, and if you're not innovating, then probably in 4 to 5 years you're going to die. But then if a brand or a company is not working on sustainable mode, right, sustainability around, then you're certainly going to die in the next 4 to 5 years, right? So at CK Birla Group, right, so let me give you one very classic example, right? We all build homes, right? We buy homes. So red brick model versus other models.
Customers are aware and customers are demanding. At the other end, we have partners who are also aware and they are enabled to deliver on sustainability. So we see ourselves as the middle path in between, connecting our customers to our partners and delivering services on a sustainable model. And I'll give you an example. About a year and a half ago, we decided that we use a lot of plastic. Typically you cut a card of plastic, right? And that is exactly what it is. Not the most sustainable of products, but we decided that we wanted to venture out and look at an alternative. And the alternative is recyclable plastic. And mind you, today, a recycled plastic is actually about 30% costlier than a normal plastic. Doesn't stand to reason, but that is the way it is, because the entire material actually comes from outside. We don't have, despite everything, you actually don't have recycled plastic in India. You actually get it imported from outside. So, and the entire process is much more complicated to make that plastic sheet. But the fact is we made a conscious decision that we wanted to reduce the carbon footprint. And also because we are a listed entity, ESG compliances, but those ESG compliances are mandatory. Having said that, the fact is we have to put in our BRSR reports and everything, being a listed entity, but that is not the only reason, because much before that, BRSR came into picture only effective March of 24. We started it much ahead because we could see that customers can appreciate and will be able to understand the ethos of this entire thing. Another example of how we contribute to sustainability is the fact is, we don't have a product per se, but then our entire value chain starts with a paper. And, we are, any kind of a loan application today, typically you think about paper, whether it's an application or whether it takes a KYC or a supporting document, you would typically think about a paper. Now, we consciously moved as much of that as possible to the digital mode. And today, I'm happy to share that we are 90% plus. You cannot do away with paper completely, especially given the fact that we, being a brand that is a banker to the nation, we are present in 19,000 of the 21,000 pin codes across the country. And it's kind of difficult to reach out digitally everywhere. And then there is a customer preference at times. That 10% which is left is more in the customer's hand. Today, I am 100% enabled to do away with paper end to end. I do not want any paper to come in. And that is a clear direction that we have to make sure that we are working towards a higher sustainability goal.
Oh, brilliant. That was insightful, Manish. Thank you so much. So now we move to Dr. Vidhi. May I ask?
Yeah, please.
The rise of ethical consumerism and its impact on customer expectations and loyalty.
Yeah.
So my question to you would be, how has the rise of ethical consumerism influenced your company product and service offerings?
Hi everyone, and thank you for listening us out. We will not bore you much. So I am part of the insurance industry for almost 20 plus years, and ethical consumerism is one thing which we can't survive without. I will give you two major points on this. One is the data protection. We work with big corporate houses, so whenever we get a lot of data from the corporate houses, their PI information, it is our prime responsibility to serve that data as a secret. So we do a lot of NDA and all that stuff so that that data, that information does not goes out, and we also handle a lot of medical information of the corporate houses. So we make sure that all these data, all this information do not go out, and that we do it through an NDA or through an agreement, through a contract, a lot of things that are legal and acceptable to the client as well. Second most important part is the transparency. Now transparency is what while we are getting claims, like as a broking house, we get a lot of death claims from the insurance company, from the clients. And I give you a very common example, and recently it happened. In one of the corporate houses, we got a claim in which the employee died because of the driving, and that was a drunken driving case. And that employee was a very low-grade employee with a very meager salary, and he was the only earning hand in the family. So the HR approached us and asked us that this claim is very important for me because the family is dependent upon this person and they don't have any other source of income. From this, they can pay out their bills or they can pay out their children education fund. But then when we went through the papers and checked the claim documents, we found out that that was a drunken driven case, and we very transparently told the HR that this cannot be paid because this is against the law and against the policies of the insurance company. And HR was kind enough to understand that process and conveyed the same to the family. But yes, at times these things are important for the HR to have a transparency with the employees, as well as employee family should need to understand that this is something which we can't go against the law. Then we then suggested them an solution to this, and going forward they can do this. They can create a fund which we call that as a benevolent fund. And through that benevolent fund, they can pass out any amount to the family of a deceased, whether it's the claim is payable or not payable. So going forward, that organization did that and it was benefited. So that was one good example of ethical consumerism.
So heartful. Thank you so much. So now we move to Anamika.
Thank you, please.
Humanizing the digital interaction, the role of empathy in customers, enhancing the customer satisfaction. And my question to you would be, can you share an example and how empathy has improved customer satisfaction in your kind of scenario?
Okay, sure. Let me start by saying that we all are now surrounded by automated gadgets, tools, platforms in every field of servicing or product. Okay, we all are consumers, and whether we are using the OTT platforms or we are using the cabs or we are using the e-commerce portals, we all have everything automated at our disposal. Okay, when it comes to balancing the act, I think over a period of time, all of us as leaders have been emphasizing more and more of automation, and we kind of tend to overlook that how do we strike a balance between automation and humanization. I'll give you a very quick example. We all are using cabs, whether it is Uber, whether it is Ola, whether it is BlueSmart, any aggregator you pull out. Most of the cabs, when we are boarding, we have any kind of concerns, we are getting the service through automated responses. Now that is serving the purpose as far as concerns around 500, 700, 1,000 rupees are concerned. That is one part of the industry who's using automation to the best of its capability. Let's take another example. If we take an example of purchasing a jewelry, do we all agree that automation in every sphere of purchase of a jewelry would work out? Maybe yes, to a certain extent, maybe no, to a very large extent, because I have to touch and feel the jewelry. I have to try it out on my, let's say, whichever body part, whether it's a finger or my hand or my wrist or my neck, to get the feel that how is it looking. Although you might want to give me a portal which says that try your look, that might not give me the exact look. So although you're trying the best to use automation for my consumers, still you would have to have an offline store to serve that consumer. I might just want to purchase that jewelry, or let's say add it to my cart, still visit a Carrot Lane or a different jewelry store to try it out, that okay, I made a purchase, I was trying to make a purchase, I had added to it the cart, but I actually want to look how it feels, how it actually looks on me, and then make the final payment. So in that industry, maybe it's not working out the best. Now coming back to my industry from I am belonging, I have more than 15 years of experience in BFSI. So when we're talking about BFSI, it is all about finance. It is about the consumer's money, right? When we're trying to build in automated processes, we have to be extremely meticulous about where do we have to put in people and where do we have to put in technology. If my customer has contacted me 5 times and my technology is always giving him some or the other kind of automated response, he will come to me for the 6th time, not just through the portal, not through any other medium, but he will directly write on social media. Maybe I don't even have to wait for a 5th time or a 6th time for the customer to come back to me. Maybe twice is good enough for the customer to come, or the 3rd time on social media and just pounce on me and write to my MD saying that none of you are working. So the technology failed over there. Why? Because I, as a strategist, I did not define a process which takes care of the balancing act. I said, let the technology take over everything and let the customer come to me only through the branches or walk in whenever he feels extremely dissatisfied. It failed. I'll give you another example. We have the largest non-PSU bank in our country, let's say, I don't want to name it, but their processes are so automated that if I want to reach out to the customer service desk, I won't be able to do that because I'll be just hovering around the IVR tree. Unfortunately, for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and finally I'll just say, okay, I give up. And I'll choose to walk into the branch. And I'll be dependent on the branch person to handle my concern or query. So that's definitely not working out. They have deployed technology to the best of their capability to think that, okay, we don't want humans to cater because the customer base is huge. It is running in crores who are actually the customer of that largest non-PSU bank. But this technology is failing because I, as a customer, I will not want to bank with that. I am banking with 5 different banks, but I'm choosing 2 of them because of their services, which is a mix or a blend of technology versus human. I don't want to run out to a human for each and every query, but whenever I need to do that, I actually need to go to that human, and it should be available at my disposal. It should not be made so difficult for me to reach out. When I talk about our organization in specific, so we have defined our processes where it's a very fine mix of human versus the technology. I would say we are still behind in terms of technology, and as a group company, Hero Group company, we have been extremely conservative all these years. Now we have become extremely open and we are now going digital full throttle. But it will take some more time to come 100% digital. But while we are trying to do that, we as leaders we are making a point that we do not make the same kind of mistakes which has been made by other players in the industry. While we're trying to learn what we should be doing, it is also important to know that what we should not be doing. Because one size does not fit all. What works with Uber might not be working with me as an NBFC. So I have to take my TG my customer base into consideration, I am serving a customer base which is based out in a tier 3 or a tier 4 city, whose ATS is, let's say, a 70,000 or an 80,000, maybe a lakh for a two-wheeler. I cannot customize my processes which are working best for my automobile industry, where my ATS is, let's say, 10 lakh or 15 lakh rupees. So I have to define my processes. Most of us are very much aware with tools like omni-channel platforms and social media ORM tools and all these things. Now, every customer who's writing to me on social media, whether on Facebook or Instagram, if everything is being responded by the bot, the customer also knows that there's nobody in real at the background, right? So they will start just visiting the branches. They will not resort to these social media tools, which you actually thought would be the ears and eyes for you from the customer's mouth. Another example, very prevalent. Most of the organizations, they follow these CSAT and NPS surveys. We have multiple tools, multiple service providers who are offering these as tools. Now, the service providers are doing a very fair job in providing these tools to the organization. Are we as organizations making a fair play between how do we use it to the best of our capability? Maybe no. Why so? Very apt example. I would have my NPS scores, I would have my CSAT scores. What am I doing with it? When I'm putting it across to the other departments, they're saying, ये तो ऐसे ही customer तो ऐसे ही बोलेगा. What do we do about it? Are we actually going ahead and trying to revamp the processes? Are we actually taking it to the management and voicing it out, what we are hearing from the customer? Why are we doing the CSAT and the NPS in the first place? After I consume any service, whether it is an Uber or any other service, they will just give me some survey, rate me. Give me a star rating. It is a 1 star or a 5 star, whether it is a Swiggy delivery, anything. So if I'm giving any kind of comment and not a compliment, is there somebody in the back end who's actually reading that comment? Is there a human who's actually strategizing basis that comment that, okay, I got 100 comments and out of that 100 comments, 50% were process limitations because of which the customer is suffering. And let's say another chunk of some comments said that, okay, there was a user fault, there was some kind of delay. So I can look into those processes, why the delay happened in the delivery of the food. I can coach my people who are actually resulting into a poor NPS score. But what about the process limitation? Did I spend that time to evaluate at my end that there is something that we need to do about the process limitation? Or let's say the limitation does not end at my end. The buck does not stop at me. I have to put it across to the management that, okay, these are the departments who have to come together and not work in silos and take cognizance of all the customer voicing which has been made out through these surveys. So this is what I'm trying to make as a point, that not just at Hero, but at, I would say at an organization level across all the industries, we have to ensure that we have enough hands that actually rocks the cradle. It cannot be automated at all the levels. Thank you.
You know what you should do, and you should better know that what should not do. That's the mantra for me from your talk today. Very nice. Thank you so much, Anamika.
Thank you.
Now, let's move to Bhagwan and asking certain questions related to innovating the customer journey by integrating new touch points and engagement model. My question to you would be, how do you identify and prioritize new engagement model for your target audience?
Thanks for Anamika to cover most of the areas, but just before answering Nidhi's question, it reminds me of my alumni. I am from Georgia Tech in Atlanta, and a couple of guys from Georgia Tech have started a company called Customer Journey Analytics, where they're focusing especially on what she wants to focus on, like looking at different processes and customer journeys across these processes at various steps and evaluating how these customer journeys are performing. Right? And they have created a dashboard kind of thing or a product around it to help the enterprises to identify which are performing customer journeys, which are non-performing customer journeys. It's not like she's saying, like customer satisfaction or net promoter score, but zooming into details specifically at which process, which customer touch journey, and what touch points, whether it is mobile phone, was it web application, or was it like SMS, where is the journey going, breaking, where is the customer not realizing a specific lead to the next point. And that product is helping various customers, not just in US, Europe and Asia and other countries. So I just wanted to add that detail because that's very important, especially in the customer journey, the loop back of looking at the detail, identifying the process, looking at customer journeys, not at the high level CSAT or NPS or sentiment analysis of voice and so on. Coming back to the actual question regarding the touch points and engagement, I'm very sure you are all familiar with multi-channel platforms, omni-channel platforms, and most of you are doing it on your table. You look at your laptop for your email. Sometimes, no, you want to go to mobile phone, right? No, I want to converse with my employee on Teams. Some people are familiar with WhatsApp. Some people are familiar with Zoom. So these are all various touch points and channels just for interacting with your own employees, sometimes with your own family members. The similar thing is happening in fintech space, where we want to interact with the customers. Where we are interacting with the customers wants to have the freedom of capability to switch from one channel to another channel. And it has to be seamless. When I say seamless, exactly like what Anamika is saying, at what process, what step, what workflow, where did I leave this particular channel, and I move to another channel, I want to see exactly at the same state, right? It's almost like your Word document, putting it on cloud, iCloud, for example, if you're an Apple guy, Apple person, and you want to look at like an iPhone on your iPhone first, then you go to the tablet, Apple tablet, and then there you want to see the document at the same state. Similar to that thing, you are creating an application form for applying for a loan, or you are doing a trade, and you have not actually submitted it, but you have transferred the money and kept it ready. You're about to send it, right? Or it can be a bank account or application form, or adding your daughter or your wife as a joint account member, or creating a fixed deposit. All these can be done across multiple channels in fintech, right? And the idea is to enable the customer and interact with the customer, right? He can chat on your mobile phone. He has a problem, he's stuck somewhere, his credit card is not working. He gets an SMS immediately saying that, is this you who got the transaction? Most of you have seen this. Immediately you can transfer to WhatsApp and say that, yes, I am the person. Then immediately they will ask the question that maybe your PIN is wrong, right? Or you have your card, old card, right? You want a quick, virtual transaction number, virtual card number, or virtual OTP. So that level of interaction with the customer is happening from the banks, from the NBFCs, from the fintech firms, right? And regarding the engagement models, it's no longer just textual, right? You have seen voice, sometimes now augmented reality, movies, right? For example, in some of the e-commerce platforms, or even I've seen one of the banks in Singapore, Honolulu, right? And they have an AR platform where home loans are processed to an AR platform, and you get into immersive platform to see how your prospective house is, right, in terms of the layouts. And based on that, they design and then apply. And based on your credit history, you pretty much get the code saying that this home or this asset or real estate asset costs this much, and this is the term, 36 months or 60 months or 20 years, based on the person's profile and history. And this is the home loan, and these are the terms. Immediately you have to give 20%, 80% is loan, and you have for this loan, this is the interest, and so on. So the engagement models have changed, and slowly you will see, you can talk, you can use your voice as one of the channels. And also the other, like Anamika was talking about, surveys, polls, quizzes, and these are helping out in terms of the customer voicing out, and customer actually voice reaching the enterprises like banks, NBFCs, and fintech firms. And that actually is improvising the customer journeys. Like the Georgia Tech alumni firm, similar thing is happening in smaller scale in different banks, NBFCs, where people are looking at customer reviews and understanding where things are going wrong in the customer workflows, whether it is in the mobile app, whether it's in a web application, or it is just that SMS thing. There is no link there, and person is unable to loop back to the web application or the mobile app. And also in terms of introducing new engagement models, introducing new channels, that happens in a, what you call, there are various methodologies which are evolving. We pick a small group of people, right, or a segment or a region and try it out first and get the feedback and improve the user experience, improve the customer experience, right, and improve all the different factors related to navigability or seamless interaction between different channels. And then slowly start implementing or introducing this particular new channel in multiple regions. So let's say we start from Delhi NCR, then we move to, let's say, West India, then we move to East India, then South India, and slowly introduce a new channel and then improve across different implementation and also time dimension. That is also helping out in terms of the new touch points, new channels, and also new engagement models. Whenever you want to try out a new thing, you don't want to do a big bang thing like whole India, pan-India. Start small, try, experiment, you fail, fix it, get the feedback, let the customers see that his feedback is being updated and he feels that, yeah, this is really good, to get the review back, and then slowly start implementing across different customers and regions.
Thank you so much. Attending to each and every until it ends. Great. Now over to Shivam. So I would like to ask you, the future of experience management, integrating customer, employee, and brand experiences. And the question to you would be, how does your organization currently integrate customer, employee, and brand experience?
Thank you so much for asking this question. And thank you so Krypton India for organizing such a beautiful event. And I run a company called Skill Circle. It's an education company. We teach data science, data analytics, machine learning, AI courses. And it's a fairly young company, comparing to these titans out there. And when I start this company, the managing customer success was comparatively easy, right? 8 years back, only 5-10 customers were there. But last year, we have trained more than 10,000 students in a year, right? And we have expanded to around 10 locations in India. And we are a hybrid model. We teach online, we teach offline as well. Now, the problem in the, how we are actually managing the customer success for now, the students who actually come to us, they have a lot of touch points. The moment students come to us, first of all, we are not going to teach them on the day one. We are doing onboarding. We are just, telling them, this is the course content that we're going to teach in the next 6 months. And these are the touch points for assignments, placements, and all that stuff, right? We got a fair understanding what's the exactly customer want from us at the time of onboarding. Then similarly, when there are a lot of touch points in the customer journey, and every lecture we record as a feedback. Like if you today, you took a lecture on, let's say, SEO. Now we have a recorded feedback of that session. How was it? The trainer was good. He practiced, good, techniques out there in teaching. Whether you learn about it, whether you're doing assignments about it, instead of, taking feedback after 6 months or 3 months of the course, right? And this practice actually working a lot for us, taking continuous feedback along the journey of the customer. And so with the employees, right? Because employees, and sometimes there is a problem comes, we are practicing so many practices, maintaining the brand and every feedback out there. We keep our organization as a student-centric. But sometimes we pressurize our staff as well to make sure they give amazing experience to the student. So there is sometimes of silos as well because across departments. But what we are practices we are doing, to maintain a good brand and also the customer experience at amazing level. We practice a lot of tech. We have a lot of LMS, CRM, HRMS, so that we give good quality experience to the student. But what we believe is the human touch at the end of the day. There is no doubt, end of the day, students or humans need humans for their solutions, no matter how much AI you introduce, right? So we have community managers, dedicated community managers for entire students, and each community manager manages 200 students a month. And they take care of the feedback, and they have a calendar to watch. They have a one-to-one session with the student as well. We go that level so that it's not just a 6-month certification program or a training session. End of the day, it's going to be a life-changing course for the students out there. So at the company level, we do have a lot of feedbacks, a lot of technologies, and a lot of trainings as well. What I feel is customer success lot depends on the company culture as well. How you train your staff, apart from giving training, what values you're teaching to the students, what values you're giving to the employees, that matters a lot. So as a training and learning development company, we invest a lot in learning, not just in students learning, in the staff learning as well. So these practices, quite helping us a lot, not just in the beginning, in the completion of the students as well. Yeah.
Definitely a right ingredient for a big organization. All the best, Shivam. Right. So now I'll ask Renuka, how do you involve employees in designing better customer experience?
Well, I'll thank you so much for a lovely question. I'll pick up from Shivam on this, and I'll go slightly back and then come forwards again. What is brand? When we say customer experience is your brand. And brand is not just that logo or the font size or your website or your social media handle or your brand ambassador or your influencers. Brand is each and every individual, from, if you want to go top down, from the founder, CEO, the CXO team, down to as low as the first person that someone meets when they come to visit you is the person who greets them at the door. Perhaps he opens the door, from there to that. So all of these touch points lead to a brand experience. And so the story that you tell on your website, via your advertising campaign, via the omni channels, via the platforms that they visit, the app, to when they meet someone in person, that story has to be in sync. And in that story, the huge role that people play, and people is each and every employee. While we hire brand ambassadors and we pay to people to pose as influencers and help us grow our following, the biggest influencers, brand ambassadors, are each and every team member that works in that organization. They breathe that organization. So that is the real strength. And as they say, charity begins at home. So first and foremost, you have to believe in your value. You have to believe in the brand promise, what you stand for. What is the vision? What is the culture? It's very easy to say, culture build karo, culture build karo. We all come here from various multinational and Indian ecosystems, corporate houses, and we know in the word culture, the first word C, we haven't even reached there, the first word. We don't know culture in reality. So to take example from some of my past life experiences, I used to work for Max India Group. I was the founding team member of a brand called Antara. It's a senior living brand. We were trying to build India's first premium retirement community. Now, when we were doing that, before we launched the brand to the world, to the external world, there are two worlds for every organization, internal and external, right? We all agree to that. So first comes the internal world. Do we believe in what we are going out for? And we said in our values, one core value was Seva Bhav. We understand the word Seva Bhav. Now that doesn't mean do charity for free. No. You do it with the intention of Seva Bhav. You charge them. You even charge them premium if you can sell. But you do it with an intention that we are here to serve you. Now, to stay true to our value of Seva Bhav, from the founder to the horticulturists in the community, the gardeners, jo hamesha bahar hote, they are always taking care of the beautiful green that we've created. From there to there, every single person lived the one core value of Seva Bhav. Now, what does that mean in reality? Real customer के साथ अब ये कैसे implement होता है? अगर कोई हमारी community was in Dehradun. Now, if the customer is in Noida, for example, or Delhi, Gurgaon, and we bring them to visit our community, there is a car that picks them up. The first interaction is that driver who is picking them up. What does that driver feel like as a person? What does he wear? Is the car smelling clean? We used to say LTFS. Look, touch, smell and feel. Has to be consistent. Whether you are meeting the CEO or whether you are meeting the driver, same feeling aani chahiye, right? So from there to there, whether it is the driver or the horticulturist or the CEO or the CMO, when they meet, they should all feel they are good people. We can trust them. This is how you build trust with your consumers. Clove Dental, we are a healthcare brand. Nobody likes to go to a dentist. सबको डर लगता है dentist से. Dentist का नाम लेते ही pain center activate हो जाता है ना? Because you go to a dentist only when you are dying in pain. Nobody likes to go there. How do you build such a business? By building trust, by making these people more empathetic, compassionate. So the training has to be such that it doesn't matter whether they buy your services or they don't. Make them feel comfortable. Make them feel nice. That is the essence of including people into the whole brand experience, and the customer experience happens through people. Yeah?
I know we are time short. मैं एक point add करना चाहूँगा रेणुका मैम पे, right? Sure. So since she mentioned Clove Dental, right? So I am a customer of Clove Dental. I took a premium membership as well. But you know what I experienced the moment I go to Clove store, it's very different. You know, they ask to remove your shoes, that is normal, but they, you know, ask you to just, you know, wear that cap so that, you know, there's no dust pollution. They gave us a membership, and after taking membership, they give a nice box which include toothpaste and everything like that. Now, there's so many years India is there, right? But no one actually took this step, you know, giving membership in dental kits in the form of like Clove Dental, and that's so premium branding out there. The moment I got the box, the feeling was so good, you know, I connected with the brand. And that's marketing. That's again marketing with the Clove campaigns as well. So this is the thing, you know, we implemented in our Noida. We just opened a new office in Noida. The moment a customer comes to us, a lot of positive quotations out there. If a customer is taking a counseling in the counseling room, we talk about that touch point as well. So for us, a customer touch point during entire journey, including the way, you know, he is actually entering the office, that also matters, not the, you know, onboarding sales or after sales, something like that. So for me, customer touch points is the very important when we talk about the customer journey out there.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for that compliment for Clove.
So I think we can continue for hours like this, but things have to come to an end. So I open the session to audience. Anyone would like to ask any question to our diverse set of panelists?
Looks like everyone is tired.
Hi. So my question is to Mr. Bhagwan Komadi. I hope I've pronounced it correct. So interestingly, you talked about innovation, and it was great examples that you've given. And more interestingly, I was checking its Chief Information Officer. So I'm curious to understand, when we say innovation, it's more about automation, making information available on the fingertips. On the other side, it's very important to have data privacy, making sure any industry you talk about, right? So how do we balance both? Or maybe how have you done the balance in making sure that information security, privacy, vis-a-vis the innovation, balance and still take to customer?
So I'll answer your question, but I don't know whether you were there in the one, just after the lunch, there was one panel session which was focusing on data privacy and security. And that probably pretty much answers your question, but just in this session, I wanted to answer your question in a slightly different way. What they have covered was to focus, how do you balance between, one is information being there, using the customer data, personalizing the customer experience, recommending customer experience, but also the PII factor, right? And the idea is to ensure that there is some personal identifiable information which has to be secured, right, in terms of data storage, data encryption at every step of life cycle of the data, right, starting from when the data comes into the door of a bank or a fintech or NBFC firm, right? We need to ensure that at the footprint lands, right? Let's say that you write a cookie, or you write a request down, or you write a file down, or a temporary file down, right there, right from there, when you're writing PI information, custom data information, that has to be encrypted, right? That has to be deleted. There has to be an archival period. There has to be a retention period. Let's say you're storing in a database. Let's say you're storing in relational and so on. Right? At the whole life cycle, you need to have, one is how long you're going to store it, when are you going to delete it, Are you going to archive it? If so, what is the retention period? How long are you going to plan to use this customer data, right? So this is the focus for information in terms of data privacy, security, and balancing for, like, you want to use customer data for targeting campaigns, personalization, recommendation, and sending leads and loop back with the customer in terms of sending the cross products or campaigning for new products or related products. Good.
So I think these are the practices, basis the InfoSec policies, and most of our organizations do follow that. I'm going to twist the question more. I being a customer now, so me being a customer, I'm like, should I really use the automation, which is making things on my fingertips? AI. Even my son, 9-year-old, is like, Alexa, what is this? What is that? And so forth. I ask him to go and check with Alexa. I don't know what you're asking for. Seriously saying. Now, in that event, if my Alexa is on every time, I'm just taking an example, Alexa is recording everything, we all know that, right? Even in our sleep, if we are thinking, I'm sure the next version will be, Alexa will record that. So my question is, as a customer, to what extent can I really balance between innovation and use the best of AI tools and make use of it? On the other side, I'm actually compromising. I've parked my car here. There's an app which very nicely say on my fingertip on the mobile, I can switch on my car, my AC is on at my home, and so on and so forth. These are all innovations and the smart technologies that we're bringing in. But where I've parked my vehicle, it's being parked for 2 hours, the information is getting captured. Tomorrow, this is being used by all the meta and data, and I hope just trying not to. So how do I, as a customer, draw a line? To what extent do I really use this? Or I'm like, that's how I'm just trying to figure out.
In the Indian context, there is an answer. If you have heard about DPI, in US, in Europe, it's GPDR. In US also GDPR, sorry. And in US, there is Consumer Act. So most of these focus on, to answer your question, like specifically, not to pick on your kid, but there are consumers who want to pay the bill using Alexa.
Yeah.
Right? So you can say, Alexa, you want to pay this bill, there's a bank account number, and you say, then it goes back and identifies, saying that I want to pay this particular bill, and it will transact. And the problem with this approach, like you're thinking, is I'm sending this voice message, and that voice message goes to Alexa. Alexa sends that message through internet to some AWS service, right? Now your concern or my concern as a customer is that I have this information saying there is a bill of so much amount, and there is a credit card or a customer account number, and it's using the customer account number and paying this particular thing, right? That information, like my bill amount, my account number, that information has to be sent from AWS service, which talks to Alexa, to the payment gateway or the payment portal or something like CC payments or specific to the region. There are various payment gateway or payment providers who process the bill payment, like bill payment providers, CBPP. So now the problem is the AWS, which is the middleman or the gateway, where I am worried. All this information, credit card or bank account information is going through this, but it looks very simple as a kid or as me that I'm talking to Alexa and it's so friendly. But whereas what can happen in the middle way, because some of the data breaches happen across the regions, in US also you'll see data breaches. Your concern is valid, but most of the things have to be secure. Right? You select all these Consumer Act, DPDP Act, GDPR, all these are focusing on exactly what you're talking about. At every touch point, at every
we don't have a GDPR, unfortunately. And
we have DPDP here in India.
Data protection.
Yeah, data protection. So in 2-3 years back, you should be worried as a consumer. But now latest, almost all the fintech firms are looking at DPDP very seriously, because that is the answer to your question. Like in this case, that AWS, let's say it's Mumbai region or Hyderabad region, there is a service which is locating, needs to abide by the policies of DPDP to ensure process your simple request, bill, specific bill provider, amount, has to be paid using the bank account or credit card. Even that information has to be secured, masked, let's say your Aadhaar card or credit card, like the last 4 digits, and saved in encrypted form, whatever may be the data source. It can be relational or no SQL database and so on. But the idea is that you need to encrypt and mask the information. And also, other important point is how long are you going to store this in the gateway or in your data source is also prescribed by the Indian DPDP Act.
So,
just add to one thing what he said, that Bill Gates once said that AI can be very dangerous unless it can be used customized way. And the very good example of a movie which recently came, Teri Baaton Mein Uljha Hua, that was too dangerous.
Yeah.
True.
So I'm sorry.
No matter what you say, you are exposing yourself by permitting, allowing that much technology. If you have Alexa, you are being heard all the time.
True.
Because we've allowed it. So it is up to us.
Can we live without that? I'm like, if you really ask me, I'll leave my son and I know somebody is watching him. Though that's not a good practice sort of. But all I'm saying is that is there a world where we can live in with all the best of things available at our fingertips, still fully secured? I think that's something that we really need to, I don't know, I don't have an answer.
I would really want to try and attempt that answer because, in terms of data, the most complex and the most, the data that is closest to everybody's hearts is the financial data. And we mentioned about banks, NBFCs, fintechs. Coming from the banking background now, let me tell you, one thing is obviously what the DPDP says. But that's a prescriptive approach, It talks about data masking, it talks about how data can be used, but most importantly, it talks about data consent. I think in all our discussions, we have not spoken about data consent, which is granular consent. So going forward, you will need to provide consent for each and every activity that you want your data to be used for. So I think in the earlier panel, somebody asked the question that, can you use my data, which you have, for your own marketing purposes? Going forward, once the rules comes out, hopefully in February next year, you will need to have express consent of even that also. For me to use your data that you've given to me, I also need an express consent. Now it's up to me whether I onboard you at the time without that consent or not. Obviously, I'm an organization, I need your data, so I would want to be able to cross-sell and upsell. But like I said, this is a prescriptive description. The most active way out is for us to make sure, and that is what all fintechs and banks at least realize, the fact is that your data is secure. And this has nothing to do with AI or any technology. You've had a bank account for the last 150 years. Your data was already out there, I'm sorry. Your bank account, and in fact, it was in a more unsecure form. You had a signature card, forget about anything else. Till about 20 years back, there was a signature card where your signature was available to anybody and everybody in the bank, but it's just in a locker. So I think we've evolved to bring in more practices and make it this not airtight, but as foolproof as possible. So every attempt that we make, every attempt that the government makes, every attempt that self-regulatory authorities try to make is to make sure that the data is secure and it is not misused. Having said that, ultimately, like Renika said, the fact is that there is an equal onus on each one of us to protect our data. Coming again from a banking background, and the fact is, with a lot of digital frauds happening and a lot of money going out of digital wallets, unfortunately, the fact is to realize that if you have your pocket, which a physical wallet gets picked from, you don't blame your bank. So e-wallet is just the same. Ultimately, the security of your product lies with you equally as well. My responsibility is to make sure that I educate you and I provide you with a channel where if there is something that I am deficient on, then I should be held accountable for.
True, thanks. I wish sometime soon, just like government reports the GDPR numbers, we have the data protection numbers as well. So knowing that you're from the SBI is very connected to the government organization, please pass.
No, it is. In fact, you're absolutely right. So the fact is the government is, there is something called the Office of the Banking Ombudsman. So you would know that.
Yeah.
So the Banking Ombudsman is where if a bank is not able to resolve your complaint within 30 days, you can go and approach the Banking Ombudsman. The Banking Ombudsman it's already there in the pipeline of the banks and the NBFCs that if the number of complaints that you get is higher than a particular benchmark of your peers, you'll get penalized as a bank. So these numbers, while they may not be published in an open domain as of now, they are available with the RBI. And trust me, there is a lot of heightened action especially from the regulator. And that is because, unfortunately, there have been a lot of organizations who tried to use the compliance, the thin line of the compliance, and use regulatory arbitrage to further businesses. So that has led to a lot of action. You've already seen a lot of action against a lot of organizations. But it's in the right direction because that is what is making sure that the customer, while it actually started from a span, the DBTBD never really intended to really control fraud. It was actually a startup from the TRA things to control spam. But the fact is that they realized over the last 5 years, the preponderance of frauds, especially digital frauds and data leakages, is becoming so massive. And there are so many data points which are out there that you need a strict regulation that can actually manage data across all points.
Great, thank you. And I think when we meet new customer clients outside India, we do check this ombudsman and, knowingly how rich is the company in terms of, but I think in India it still needs to be picked up. So thank you, that was informative.
So we can carry forward the further conversation.
Just one minute to add on to what Manish said, right? To your example, Alex, at some point of registration, you would have seen when you're adding Spotify or other data sources, there is a small checkbox saying that can we contact you for marketing purposes. So that's what is the consent which is talking about. If you look at all, right.
So, like I said, as a business, I need that.
So all of these are actually there, but only thing is, like these are all US based, right? In India now we have DPDP, which
necessary evil.
Consent.
You can't move, so that's why you are forced to. Now you are sucked into that cycle, and so you are scared, but you want to use. You are scared, but you want to use. So that's where we are at the moment.
So can we take the discussion offline? I'm so sorry, we are really running short of time. My sincere apologies. It was such a beautiful interaction. Can we please take it offline? Yeah, okay.
And I picked this up from where you categorically mentioned that you are 90% online digital today. Right? So today we have so much automations, we have chatbots, we have other modes of engaging the users through different online media and everything. I believe it has been easy to start the journey, but to get the journey completely digital, how has it been for you? How have you managed that 90% is done online, especially when we know that someone, when starts a process, there are so many competition across and they also jump across at the same time. Still you manage. So what happens initially is that when you start an online journey. But does it really get completed through an online mode only? That's what I really want to know with your experience.
Absolutely so right, and that's the biggest pain point that I have. And every incremental change from 70 to 90, was blood and sweat. And from 90 to 91, it's become difficult. And it's going to be equally difficult because of two things. One is the customer impatience because of the way the process is. So I said in my previous discussion, the fact is that if the underlying process is not digitally efficient, there's no use of digitizing the process. So you need to get sure that you put in those things in place. So just to take 2 minutes out of this thing, KYC has been the biggest game changer in terms of digitizing because that was the biggest fail point that we have. The next big thing which is going to happen, at least in our journey, is going to be use of alternate data for underwriting. We are a lending organization, right? And for those who would have already, and I'm sure each one of you have some or the other contact with a lending agency, one thing that you do is a verification. And that's the other failure point. You get a call, you get somebody to visit, just to identify two things. The KYC is to identify that you are an individual who exists. The second is that you are an individual who exists and does what you told me that you're doing and that you have the capacity to pay. So that verification today is either a telephonic or a physical verification. Very soon with a lot of alternate information and alternate underwriting, that information can be available on the fly, which would take the journey from that 90 to 95%. 100% should not happen, will not happen and should not happen also. But the balance is going to come from there.
Thank you so much for being a wonderful audience and being patient. It was a nice session. I thoroughly enjoyed being with you all and dear audience. Thank you.
Let's be on the stage. I would request Prachiti to please come up on the stage. Prachiti is the co-founder and CEO at Krypton, to felicitate our moderator and the panelists. Can I please have the music? First up, we have Nidhi Chadda, Customer Experience Specialist Moderator, moderated the session so beautifully. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for Nidhi Chadda. Then we have Renuka Tudeja, former CMO, Globe Dental. Let's give it up for Renuka, guys. Woohoo! Then we have Nidhi Grover, VPC, ex-Prudent Insurance Brokers. Let's give it up for Nidhi, guys. Then we have Anamika Chatterjee, heading Customer Service, Retail Finance, Hero FinCorp. Let's give it up for Anamika. Then we have Bhagwan Kumari, Chief Information Officer, Capri Global Capital Limited. Let's give it up for Mr. Bhagwan, guys. Come on, I need the claps coming in. It was such an amazing session. Then we have Monish Vora, EVP and Head Operations, SBI Card. Let's give it up for Mr. Monish. Come on, guys. We've asked them so many questions. It means it was interactive. Let's reciprocate them in form of claps. Then we have Priya Chaudhary, Head Brand and Media, Corporate HIL Limited. Let's give it up for Priya Chaudhary. Come on, yes. Then we have Shiva Bahuja, Founder and CEO,